They've won Tonys and Oscars and Emmys and Grammys. There's no red carpet because they're home in their jammies. From Melrose Place to Broadway to Janeway and her crew. Let Seth and James bring all the stars to you.
Anywho.
They're entertaining everyone, so who's gonna grouse? Just sit right back and you'll hear some tales on Stars in the House.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stars in the House. I'm James Wesley.
And I'm Seth Rudetsky. And normally, and this still is, a fundraiser for the Actors Fund. And, even when things were going great, the Actors Fund was still doling out tons of money. And now, of course, things are not going as great. So, boy, there's still a big fat need.
Yes. Just to let you know real quick, because we've got a big show tonight. The Actors Fund, if you don't know what the Actors Fund is, the Actors Fund is a lifeline to countless people that are professionals in the performing arts
All
around the
aspects of
country.
arts. Yeah, around
That's
the country.
Right. On stage, backstage, TV, film, opera, dance, anything that is in the arts and you're a professional in it, you can go to the Actors Fund for help. You can go to actorsfund.org. If you are able to give, please go to starsinthehouse.com. I don't know if we'll have time today to read donations.
I hope we will, though.
If we can, we will for sure. So you can forward it to donations@starsinthehouse.com. You can also text Fund 2020 to 56512, and then you'll also get a receipt from the Actors Fund. We ourselves, for Stars in the House, we began in March of 2020 when everything shut down, and we're up to over $1.1 million for the Actors Fund. Every penny of that has gone to the Actors Fund. We're really proud of that, and our team behind us, and our viewers. Our team behind us. Well, they're over. So if you see us looking, if you see Seth looking over in that direction, that's because that's where Bagel and Mandy are right now. There's Bagel and there's Mandy. There's Mandy right there.
Yeah, they're right over there.
But today is a show that's so important. We were doing the show every single day, twice a day when everything shut down. And when Broadway reopened, we had said all along that we were going to stop doing the show when Broadway reopened, but we continued in doing it once a week. And this is one of the reasons why we're glad that we're able to do it more than once a week.
Yeah.
Because by the way, we still have our show. I'm sorry, Seth. We still have our show scheduled, our holiday show on Thursday at 8 p.m. with Ann Hampton Callaway and Liz Callaway. And
Natasha Diaz and her dad, who just is getting a Kennedy Center Award.
That's right. So you'll see it televised on CBS this Wednesday. They're going to be here on Thursday. But with everything going down with the Omicron variant and it affecting not just Broadway, but the world, of course, the first person we called was Dr. John LaPook to ask him to bring on some of his colleagues that are world-renowned experts. And then we called our friends that are in Broadway shows and in tours and said, do you have questions? And we got some yeses, including, by the way, some of the yeses were from three of the stars of Jagged Little Pill, Elizabeth Stanley, Kathryn Gallagher, and Lauren Patton. And Lauren had called at 6:30 and said,
basically, they just got their closing notice, but not closing notice. Their show closed. So they played their final performance without even knowing it was their final performance. And actually, they were very lighthearted in their devastation, but they were like, tonight, we have to basically deal with our up and down emotions. And
because they had so many breakthrough cases that the producers decided to shut down
sustain it
entirely.
So their show is now, Jagged Little Pill is now officially closed. So the three of them are like, cut. We want to just basically chill out and drink.
Though Kathryn Gallagher did say, David, so you know, Kathryn Gallagher did say that she would try to come on at some point on her phone to just say basically how she feels. She doesn't know if she'll be up for a question.
Say hi to the fans.
Just say hi to people that are tuning in for then. So if you are tuning in because you're a Jagged Little Pill fan, Kathryn Gallagher is looking to not disappoint. We can't guarantee it, but Kathryn said that she's going to do her best to come on.
So today's hashtag Day of Clarity.
Yeah, that's great, Seth. So I say right away, let's bring on our friend, the chief medical correspondent of CBS News and Stars in the House, Dr. John LaPook.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Dr. LaPook.
We meet again.
Yes, and we need some updates.
We need clarity. I love what you said.
Hashtag Day of Clarity.
Hashtag Day of Clarity. I think I want to start here, and I know I've said this over and over again. You saw my Twitter and Instagram tag there, handle at NYU Empathy.
Yes.
This has got to be a moment of empathy, right? Because we are almost 2 years into this. We are fed up. We're not, obviously, here we go again. And we want to talk today with Omicron spreading so rapidly. I just heard from the CDC, the doubling time may be as little as 1.5 to 2 days. So 75% of the circulating new cases now are Omicron. So it's ripping across the country and across the world. It's very infectious. There's some good news in there that I want to get to. One of which is that people who are vaccinated and boosted so far have been doing very well, relatively well. I, in the last week, have had about a half a dozen, maybe more, people who all of them were fully vaccinated, all of them were boosted, all of them got COVID, which I'm presuming is Omicron, although we didn't genotype it. And all of them are doing well. That's just an N of 6, but they have cold symptoms. One of them had like mild flu-like symptoms. They're all doing fine. So that's really good. The bad news is if you're not vaccinated, and this was on the CBS Evening News tonight, the CDC came out with a number, you're 20 times more likely to die if you are unvaccinated than if you are vaccinated and boosted. Much more likely to get infected. Sorry.
So I'm gonna ask my first question, Dr. LaPook, before I forget it, because there's so many questions that not just I have, but so many people have, and I know we've got a piece, and you may address it in this great piece that you had on. Was it just yesterday?
Just yesterday, CBS Sunday morning. Yeah.
Okay, so David got it ready, and I did see. I watched it in live time, but I don't know if it's on there. But here's the thing:
life.
if in real life, if I get COVID and it's the Omicron variant, and I am boosted, but I still get it, and I come in contact with someone who does not have a booster, or God forbid, someone who is not vaccinated, will they get it, and will it cause serious illness? Or does it have the more of a possibility to cause serious illness?
Yeah, well, so far the good news is it's much more infectious. It's spreading much more quickly than the Delta variant. But so far, early days, it seems to be less likely to kill you or cause serious illness in any one person. South Africa, the hospitalizations were not as high as they thought that they were going to be. Now, South Africa, so many of the people there were already infected, and a lot of them were younger. So maybe we're not seeing what happens with a normal population, but it looks like so far, early days, if you're older, you're more likely to end up in the hospital. But if you're younger, that it's less likely. It appears. I keep saying appears really because we're what? The doubling time is so fast that 2 weeks ago was barely here. So it seems in the early days that it's less likely to make you seriously ill if you are vaccinated and boosted. But if you get infected and get a breakthrough infection, absolutely. All of these infections that I saw were in people who were vaccinated and boosted, infecting somebody else who is vaccinated and boosted. So the answer to your question is yes, you can infect them, but so far the people who were infected, they're doing very well.
So that's the good news, but the bad news is that if I have it and I infect someone who is not boosted, their chances of having serious illness the chances of them getting serious illness go up, right?
I'm sorry, James, what you're trying to say is he's asking that if he's boosted and vaccinated, does he have a lesser version of the disease that's not as scary for somebody?
Yes.
Or is it
Yes, it looks like so. Can I just say exactly what the science shows right now? Because I don't want to get ahead of it.
Sure.
We found out for Delta that if you are vaccinated and boosted, not only does the amount of neutralizing antibodies, we've said that enough on this show that I can just say the neutralizing antibodies, not only do those go up, but they are associated with a decreased risk of serious illness, okay, of you getting either hospitalized or dying, okay? We know that with Omicron, and today there was very good news for people getting the Moderna booster, that, the number of neutralizing antibodies went up like over 30 times, I think, if you got the booster. And we're seeing similar type of things in the lab, in test tubes with Pfizer. What we haven't proven yet is that translates to being less likely to have serious illness or die. But all the experts, including Tony Fauci and others, expect that that's exactly what's going to happen. And right now, this is today's statistics, if you are fully vaccinated and you are boosted, you are 20 times less likely to die than if you are unvaccinated. So there's no doubt whatsoever that not only should you be vaccinated, but you have to be boosted, because what's happening is with the waning immunity that happens over time with the regular immunization, which was a 2-dose for the mRNA and Johnson & Johnson was 1, it needs to be boosted in order to be able to have enough neutralizing antibodies to have a fighting chance, get your dukes up against Omicron. So, we can say a lot more after
we have
this
a piece up.
summary. And I just want to start, though, before you run that, I just want to say, and we'll say it again afterwards because it's so important to me. You said, let's make the whole show talking about Omicron and about risk factors and about, like, we're talking about Broadway. Okay. This is a moment when we're not looking to name names, point a finger at people, say you should have done this, you should have done that. This is a very changing operation. I have empathy really for everybody, from cast to producers, the people who own the theaters, in terms of the fact that this has been such a changing picture, and we haven't known, we haven't all come together and rowed in the same direction in terms of saying, all right, these are the protocols. Okay. So I don't think this is a moment where it's going to do anybody any good, even though people are frustrated, to start pointing fingers and really, we don't know enough to point fingers. I think what we can do today is exhale, just talk about what we know about the science. And I'm an internal medicine professor of medicine, gastroenterologist. I see patients. I am the chief medical correspondent for CBS News. You're going to see Kim Prather, who's an aerosol scientist. She knows a ton about how these things flow through the air. Michael Mina is an infectious disease doctor and epidemiologist, knows a lot about testing. None of us, as far as I know, we can ask them, have been backstage to look at the protocols. We don't know exactly what they are. So we're not in a position to criticize them or anything like that. I think that today will be most productive if we just say, here's what we know today. And then we can leave the postmortems about what should have happened or could have happened to some other time. But I think that's my wish. Bring the temperature down. Everybody's so upset just for the pandemic alone, and now so upset with what's going on in Broadway. I think it's a moment to just bring the temperature down and just calmly discuss enough and lay out enough facts as we know them today, knowing they may change tomorrow, so people can start to make logical decisions. And that's where this piece comes in. We spent a long time on this, vetted it with the CDC and a bunch of other people. So as far as I know, as of 24 hours ago, this is the latest that there is.
Okay, here we go.
It happened this past week.
Coronavirus deaths in the United States surpassed 800,000 as this pandemic approaches the end of year 2. That's the highest known death toll of any country on Earth. 1,300 people dying of COVID every day. It's confusing and worrisome, and it's the holidays, which is why we scheduled this appointment with our Dr. John LaPook.
Let's face it, we're all fed up with COVID. And with Omicron spreading rapidly, there's more uncertainty ahead. Like many doctors, I'm often asked how to stay safe. The answer is, the more layers of protection, the smaller the risk. As a quick reminder, the layers are vaccination, including a booster if you're eligible; masks, the better the mask, the better the protection; keeping a distance from the next person; washing your hands; getting COVID tests; and improving ventilation and air filtration. Remember, the virus travels through the air. So is it safe to get together with friends indoors if no one will be wearing a mask? I'll answer the question with a question. What is your tolerance for risk? Mine is very low. I would feel reasonably comfortable taking off my mask indoors with friends under 3 conditions. First, everyone must be vaccinated, and that includes a booster. Vaccine effectiveness can weaken over time, and boosters increase protection against variants like Delta and Omicron. Second, anyone who feels the least bit sick should stay home. That includes mild symptoms that seem to be from a cold or allergies. Third, I'd want everyone to take a home antigen test immediately before getting together. It's very good at telling you if you have enough virus in your system to infect somebody else within the next several hours. The test is such an important tool to help limit spread, I think it should be free. Other considerations are the number of people in the room. I wouldn't want it to be too crowded. There should be good ventilation. Open the windows and doors and consider using an air purifier. Of course, no COVID protocol is perfect, and we've all heard of breakthrough Delta infections in people who are fully vaccinated and boosted. It's important to note that for them, the risk of winding up in the hospital or dying has been much lower than for unvaccinated people. It's still early, but public health experts expect that will also be the case with the Omicron variant. So get vaccinated. Even people who have already recovered from COVID will benefit from vaccination. It appears Omicron may be less likely than other variants to cause severe illness, but it's also been spreading more rapidly. So if large numbers of people become infected, hospitals could fill up again and the healthcare system could become overwhelmed. Despite the challenges, I'm optimistic. We have treatments that work, and more are in the pipeline. There's a promising new pill from Pfizer. But one accomplishment stands above the rest: the vaccines. I've been vaccinated and I've had a booster, and it's the best insurance policy I own. I know that despite all my best efforts, I could still become infected, especially given what's happening with Omicron. But it's very unlikely I'll get seriously ill. That gives me great peace of mind. So my closing thought for anyone who is eligible but not yet vaccinated is this: why take an unnecessary risk when it comes to your precious health? And for everyone, here's to a happy and healthy 2022 and beyond.
Excellent.
Thank you, Dr. LaPook. Before we go to the experts, we want to just bring on an actress from Broadway whose show just dropped a bomb. It was a jagged little bomb. Please welcome Kathryn Gallagher.
Oh, hi, Kathryn.
A jagged little bomb.
Oh.
Yeah,
We're sorry.
I don't know if you guys can tell it. I've actually been crying all day.
Oh.
It's so crazy because, you know, I think we're all so surprised. And I think if anything, the last 2 years have taught us to be ready for anything and not take anything for granted. And I mean,
How is the cast doing? You've spoken to Lauren and Elizabeth and all the clowns?
I've spoken to everyone. And, you know, I think that we're all just, everyone is heartbroken. You know, for me, this journey started in 2017, and this show has raised me and taught me so much about myself, about how I, you know, I mean, it's been the most sort of like growth I've ever experienced in one project. And so I think it's, you know, it's really devastating, and it's just uncharted territory.
Kathryn,
Yeah.
do you mind telling the audience before you go what you? Oh,
Am I back? I got it.
You there? No, you're there. I can hear
FaceTime.
you. What you told us, what you told me and Seth, that I thought was
Wait,
so...
I can't hear you now.
Uh-oh.
How about now?
Can you hear
Oh
us?
no. Oh no.
Well, I can't tell the story because your story.
I'll come out and come back in, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Okay. Goodbye.
That was super fun.
That-
It was a solid 5 seconds.
Well, that's a metaphor. The unpredictability.
Yes, of even StreamYard. Even though they're our sponsors, we love them.
Yes.
Okay,
that is
should we
true.
bring on an expert?
Well, is Kathryn coming right back?
I don't
Let's
know.
see.
This is all live, folks.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that's
everyone's
so hard. That's so hard to see. And
When you don't know it's your final show, because you always go through that moment where you go, "This is my final show." Oh, there's Miss Gallagher.
Except
Yay!
Kathryn.
Talk about your psychicness, Gene Dixon.
Yeah.
I had a feeling. I mean, for better or for worse, really, it was, you know what? Part of it was I had a conversation with my brother. We were canceled on Thursday, and Friday I was like, you know, just talking to him about the state of the world. And he was like, you know, just enjoy every second. And I sort of had this feeling like, if this is going to be the last time I ever do this, I want to feel it. And I want to. So I had a moment during You Learn, even especially where I looked out into the audience and I took in like every single seat. Like I really took it in, and I thought, if this is the last time I ever get to do this, like, remember it. Like, it was like I made my eyes a little camera, and I think I found as much closure from that like weirdly bizarre, intuitive, psychic moment. And But I think that, beginnings and endings are always the hardest thing that, a person can go through. And while we, did not see this coming and I think everyone is pretty devastated at all of it. I firmly believe that, and from the people I've spoken to who've seen the show, the work that the story our show told changed so many lives, and I'm so proud of it. I never thought I would get a chance to play a character like Bella Fox and to tell that story, and I'm really proud of it, and I feel good knowing that,
Oh, Kathryn,
well,
thank you.
And you don't underestimate, it's nice to hear you. Well, of course, you're going to be emotionally intelligent to be able to embrace it, because, it's on top of all of everything that everybody's feeling, me too, the sadness of just being in the pandemic this long. And then on top of that, to get this slap in the face. And, it's the unpredictability. It's being, there's lab experiments where basically, unpredictable punishment at variable times over which you have no control make you depressed.
Yeah.
That's been the last, number of years. So, that's what happens when it's sort of like, whoa, wait a second. I thought how many times do we think we're emerging, and then suddenly we're pulled back. But we will, if you happen to keep watching later, but I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to just go and do something else.
I don't think she'll be watching.
I actually am optimistic, and I think this may be that we're headed towards the end of this pandemic, and there is a path that makes sense that this would be a road to the end of this pandemic. So that going out with a little bit of a roar rather than a whimper. But we'll talk about that later. But I think, keep the faith. I think we are going to get out of it.
It's kept. And I think the cool thing about, what we do is there's never a shortage. There's never a small demand for storytellers and for, the theater will always survive. It survived, while Shakespeare was going through the plague, and it's going to survive through this. And so the one thing I never worry about is, if theater will be okay, if Broadway will be okay. And this is like a personal devastation and devastation to our cast and our crew and our company. But the story of Jagged Little Pill will live on. And this is a bump in the road for Broadway, for theater. So I know that'll prevail, and I can't wait to return to the stage and whatever the next thing is.
Well, it's not just that theater is going to survive. We said it, 2 years ago? The arts is how we survive. The arts have always saved us from the very beginning. If we're going to be saved, it's been by the arts. And so I'm not worried about the arts surviving, and I think that's how we survive.
Me too. Thank you guys for having me on. I love you.
Bye, Katty.
I love you so much.
Bye.
How nice.
Okay.
What was she going to say? She said good something.
Before we bring on the next actor, we want to bring on, I'll have you bring on and introduce Dr. Prather and Dr. Mina. So why don't you do the honors?
Yeah, right from the very beginning of the pandemic, Kim Prather and Michael Mina have been go-to people for me. Kim is an aerosol scientist and from Scripps, and she'll tell you more about herself. And she's actually into climate issues, and she's a tour de force. She's amazing. But she actually was somebody who, it was the aerosol scientists over here. I'll try to get in frame. And the doctors, the medical doctors over here, and the aerosol scientists were jumping up and down saying, it's in the air, it's in the air. And we didn't really understand that to the extent that ventilation and air filtration was so important. And finally, largely through the efforts of people like Kim Prather and Lindsay Marr and Don Milton and others,
right.
Joseph Allen being another one, finally we got it through our skulls. Okay, it's in the air, very important. Michael Mina, till recently, was up at Harvard. He'll tell you about his latest journey in life. He's an epidemiologist, and he's been out there very publicly talking about testing, especially the rapid testing. And again, he's been somebody who's been thinking well, and who I've turned to many times to say, okay, let's talk about this and try to figure out what's logical. So why don't we just bring them on? I'd like them to introduce themselves also and say, here's what I do. So pop them on.
All right, here we go. Dr. Mina, Dr. Prather. Hello.
Hi, Michael. Hi, Kim. Thank you very much. Nice painting above you, Kim.
It's my temporary house, because at the end of the pandemic, my house flooded.
Oh, you told me
this
that
is the
yesterday.
artwork that comes with the house in La Jolla. So
Yeah. Just so why don't we start, Kim? We're talking with you. Why don't you start by just sort of saying, because people, even though some people have seen you and some people have seen Michael, you've both been on. Just say, like, for people who are looking at you for the first time, who is this person? You'll say it better than I. Who is this person? So, What is your name and what do you really do?
What do I do? That's a tough one. Depends on the day. So I'm Kim Prather. I'm a professor at University of California, San Diego, and I also run a large National Science Foundation center that focuses on aerosols. But my main research, as you mentioned, has been on climate. Aerosols, how they affect clouds and climate and our weather and that kind of thing. And so this has been a little bit of a detour for me. I do know how aerosols behave. I do know how they move. I understand the aerosol part. So I got sort of, when questions were being asked, can they go further than 6 feet? I got baited in. And to me, it just seemed obvious. Of course they go. I study aerosols that go 10,000 miles. So 6 feet was kind of humorous to me. So I got pulled in, just trying to help, basically change, as you say, the medical view that has been out there for now over 100 years, that this virus is in the air. It's a simple way to say it. It travels in aerosols, which are little things that come out when you speak that float versus droplets that drop. And the medical community, as you know, had focused much more on the drops. So they all thought 6 feet was enough. Right. So we've kind of turned that on its head. We're still working on it, though. There's still confusion, and I'm sure we'll talk about tonight.
And Kim, did I get it right? I know you're at UC San Diego, but you're also affiliated with Scripps, right? Or did I get that wrong?
No, so there's two Scripps. There's Scripps Institution of Oceanography,
right,
which is the Scripps that is part of UC San Diego that I'm affiliated with.
That's what
department. And there's also another Scripps that's like a biology,
right.
separate,
No.
independent. Okay. Not that one, but yeah.
Michael, Mina, and you have had a really interesting path here. So why don't you say where you were until recently and say what you're doing now? We like to also say, in full disclosure, if anybody here has any conflicts of interest and all that stuff, we say, here's what we're doing. So we don't want people to be saying, oh, wait a second, I didn't know that he or she did this. So.
Sure. Well, currently I'm the chief science officer of a company called eMed, which is, I'll tell you what it's about, but I'll just start with that. I was just recently a faculty at the Harvard School of Public Health and Harvard Medical School. As an epidemiologist, an immunologist, and also a pathologist at Brigham, where I was overseeing molecular virology diagnostics before the pandemic, of course. And then once the pandemic hit, I started a large testing operation at the Broad Institute, which is a big sequencing and testing operation now. Generally in the past, I'm actually an immunologist and epidemiologist, and testing is also an expertise of mine, but it was always so secondary as my medical discipline. I really put more focus on my research. And of course, when the pandemic hit, between testing, vaccine immunology, and epidemiology, all of this stuff, came together, and I found myself in a lot of the center of many different aspects of this, and ended up just starting to really focus on testing, because nobody was, kind of like Kim's experience, I bet, nobody was talking about it. And it was like there are certain aspects of this pandemic that were almost entirely neglected, despite being such fundamental aspects of how one controls a virus. And in the terms of testing, it's the only way we know where the virus is if we're testing appropriately. Ventilation, aerosolization, these are such basic concepts that should have been at the fore. And I think some of us, there are very few epidemiologists, very few physicians. No physicians were talking about rapid testing. In fact, they were fighting against it, for almost all of this pandemic. And for me, it was about, linking biology and testing, and linking what we know about the spread of this virus to coming up with simple solutions that, unfortunately, in the US have only now, a little too late, starting to take off in the public eye. But that's where I'm coming from. And at eMed, just to get my disclosures out there, I'm the chief science officer of eMed. We're a digital healthcare company. They recruited me away from Harvard, and frankly, I recruited myself away from Harvard because I was a little burnt out of the academic world. And And what we do is we authenticate rapid tests. In this case, we're authenticating people's use of rapid tests to enable them to be used for public health reporting. I kept seeing when I would talk to governments of countries or just county health departments, everything in between, people would say, "Oh no, we can't rapid test because we wouldn't be able to have public health reporting." And so public health facilities were some of the most outspoken against this idea of everyone having access to their own information on their own terms, because they wanted the data to make its way to the public health authorities. And so what we do at eMed is to enable people to take a test at home, have it be reported to the appropriate public health agencies, and then also allow people to be able to use it to travel, to do all kinds of things, get a prescription once Pfizer comes out. So essentially making an at-home test useful beyond just what I call test to know. There's all kinds of other reasons that somebody tests at home, and it's not just to know for yourself, but a lot of other things. So that's essentially what eMed is, and we're really a software company working at the interface of biotech and public health.
Thanks. And so you've made the, you kind of switched. For a long time, I wasn't thinking about any kind of conflict of interest because you're at Harvard, you're a pure scientist. And now I just want to make sure people understand, it's a harsh term, conflict of interest, but it's just, you're now in a company that does stand to profit from, selling this service. So I just want to put that out there. But for a long time before that, I take it you're saying,
Dr. Mina,
you're saying the same thing.
Any article basically, because we're going to bring out Christine Toy Johnson, who's on the road with Come From Away. Basically, though, Dr. Mina, it's anytime there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, and it was about testing, you were the go-to person, which I know is a big reason why Dr. LaPook, he's your go-to person also, and Kim Prather with Aerosol. So with that in mind, because Christine is on the road, she literally just got, I believe she's told me earlier, Knoxville, Tennessee, only a few hours ago. So she's tired from traveling.
She's doing Come From Away.
She's doing Come From Away. She's one of the stars. So I'm going to bring her out and she can tell her story, and she's got some questions. So please welcome to Stars in the House, Christine Toy Johnson.
Thank you so much. Hi. It's great to see you. I'm so just honored to be able to ask you these questions. So I've been with the first national tour of Come From Away since it began in August of 2018. And then, of course, we had that long intermission. And we relaunched in October in Memphis. And we have been playing since then all of these cities that have fairly low vaccination rates. So I personally, I'm boosted. I double mask indoors. I haven't eaten inside a restaurant since July, that little golden period of time when we thought it was okay. And our company, of course, we've got two incredible health and safety managers, Tristan and Jamie, traveling with us who orchestrate the testing. We are tested 3 times a week. The safety protocols backstage are very rigorous. The company is all vaccinated, of course, and masked when we're not on stage. My two biggest questions are, how else can we protect ourselves when we're in environments where it seems like they don't think there's a pandemic happening? We see faces all over the place. And then also, our audiences have to be masked to see the show. They don't have to prove anything else because we're in these states that don't allow it, basically. But sometimes we'll look out and we'll see in the front row people decide they don't need to wear their mask, and so it's down around their chin. And people have expressed concern that could affect us if their front rows are placed farther back than usual. If there was a pit, there are no seats in there. Our musicians are on stage with us. So our front rows are not very close to us as they used to be. But can we be affected by people not wearing their masks in the audience with this idea of
not having to show proof of vaccination? Yeah. So you don't know if they're vaccinated or not.
I think it's a Kim Prather question.
Yeah.
Dr. Prather?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah. So short answer is, I would be concerned, but there is a pretty simple fix that we've been using. I've helped school districts reopen, where kids don't wear masks very well at all. And we've done it successfully, even during the worst parts. And the key is just to, first, ventilation, but I really believe in filtration. So if it were me, I would want a line of HEPA filters, just simple filters that draw the air through them, and they will pull the virus out of the air. It's really simple. And don't get fancy plasmas. You buy the cheap one that just filters it out. So what I always tell people is it's just a filter, like your lungs are a filter, but you'd rather have it go in that filter than your lungs, right? So that's what I would suggest. That is, I would disperse them honestly through the hall. Filtration is just turning out to be an amazing safety net. It's not the only thing, as I say, ventilation, making sure masks, but as you say, you don't have control of everybody with masks. You can't wear a mask so you're pretty vulnerable at that point. So your best bet, my top choice that has been my go-to and has paid off in a lot of ways is just to have really good filtration and just the simplest HEPA system you can get.
And to put them like in the wings and the front of the stage and the pit, just throughout.
I would put them between you and them would be the best. And it will just pull it through. Mm-hmm.
Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just want to be clear, because there is, I want to put it out there. I'm like 1,010% for vaccination. I think everyone should get vaccinated, but I think when it comes to transmission, which is what the question here is about, we have to be really cognizant that vaccines are only moderately helping with transmission. They are exceedingly important. They are by far the most important aspect of this entire pandemic response. They will keep you out of the hospital for the most part. But it is really important to recognize that transmission is still happening despite vaccination. And it's also really important to understand that it doesn't mean the vaccine's failing if you get infected when you've been vaccinated. It doesn't mean that. The vaccines were never intended as their primary endpoint to be transmission blockades. That was there was early data that suggested it might happen. I won't go into detail why I think that was wrong for us to push the message and the narrative. But just so that you know, Christine, I think given your question, it's really important to recognize that, and it's important for everyone to recognize that the vaccines are really important for our personal health, but given Omicron, given other variants, and just given the way these vaccines work with our body and the way this virus works in our body, we should really be we should be thinking about things like the air around us, like how to keep the virus out of the location in the first place. Almost as though we didn't know what vaccines existed. We should really be thinking about all of these things because, for example, Omicron is so infectious now that Omicron in an entirely vaccinated group of people is more transmissible than the original variant was in an entirely unvaccinated group. So that's kind of a way to think about it. I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah, we have to be really careful despite vaccinations.
So you're saying masks are really the key.
And I'll add one thing about the masks because, Christine, you said I'm double masked, and I know Kim will love this. Double masked with what? So one of the things that I said in my piece that you saw at the beginning, I don't know if you happened to be there when we ran it from Sunday morning yesterday, is, mask up. The better the mask, the more the protection. And I didn't have time in a 3-minute piece to get into it, but N95, KN95, KF94, right? I think we're kind of outgrowing in terms of how infectious Omicron is the plain surgical mask that's billowing out.
No.
So I don't know what mask you have, but sometimes the double mask isn't necessarily better than having one really well-fitted, KN95 or N95.
We have those.
Putting a mask over the top of a good N95 can actually break the seal and make it worse. So you have to be really careful. I just want to add one other thing where you might be vulnerable that you maybe haven't thought about. And so what is done behind the scenes? So I think, I sort of have this hypothesis that a lot of the spread happens when, you're around people and everybody's wearing masks, and then you go to a public restroom, or you go backstage, or you go to a break room, you go to eat. You don't see anybody around, so you take off your great mask and you eat or do whatever because there's nobody there. This virus will hover in the air for several hours. So there doesn't have to be anybody there. If somebody was there that was infectious and left that room, it could still be there. And I think that's one extra sneaky way that this virus has gotten around, is anytime you're in a public place, people will say, I had the best mask. But if you took it off in those situations, doesn't quite count. So I just want to throw that out there too, because most people do not know this.
You made me aware about elevators. When you're by yourself in an elevator, keep the mask on because the virus could linger from the last person there.
Yeah, I actually just want to follow up shortly with the elevator question, because we are in these hotels. Nobody else is wearing a mask. You can tell a member of Come From Away by looking for the masks. And we do have the KN95s on us all the time. How can we protect ourselves besides, I often will just get off when somebody comes on that doesn't have a mask on.
I would argue that you're protected as long as you have a really good mask. And I would just, if it were me, and I advise a lot of people on masks, it turns out that the KN95s, there's actually I hate to say this, but there's quite a few counterfeits that don't work that well. So there's all kinds. I'm happy to share links where you can go look up your mask and see if it's a really good one. They've all been tested. They should, like an N95 should filter 99%, no problem, of what, the size of aerosols that have the virus. If you're wearing that, I don't know anyone who has caught it with an N95, that was truly wearing it.
And I will tell you clinically, in April of 2020, I was on the COVID wards at NYU Langone Health, where I'm a professor of medicine, and people were coughing in my face with COVID. Especially, I remember this one woman, she just turned and coughed in my face. She must have been 2 feet from me. I had an N95. I did have a shield. And I didn't get COVID. So the masks do work. So when I really want, if I really want to be careful, I'm wearing that N95. I mean, yes, it leaves the lines. It's tough for you going on stage. But, I almost think it's like, okay, people look back at the film. They go, yep, that was the pandemic,
But there are good ones now. I have this one over there. I use this Flex. It's a 3M mask. And there's also this one called Aura that's an N95. They are comfortable. I don't have lines on my face when I wear them. So
Kim, there's a website you were going to mention. Isn't there one for N95s? It's N90.
It's projectn95.org.
Yeah.
It's actually a nonprofit, but they've tested them all.
What is that?
They sell them. They're like a nonprofit that tests all of the that looks weird, but I think that's
one
right.
word, Project N95. You got it.
They're really good, and they've tested them. They only sell masks that are verified, so that you don't get the counterfeits. There's a number of places you can go to find out about the right masks. The issue is that early on with the other, the previous viruses, we got away with wearing not great masks. We got away with wearing surgical masks, medical masks. It was okay. But as the, amount of virus that's coming out and the infectiousness has increased to the point of, measles, you can't get away with what you used to get away with before. And a lot of people don't realize that. They just think it's the drudge and it's still the same. It's the same virus, but it is so much more infectious now, as John has mentioned.
Christine, before you go, did you have other questions? I'm sure also if you stay watching, because we have another guest who's going to come on in just a minute, so maybe some of your questions will be answered. But did you have anything else specific?
No, I think that thank you so much. That's really helpful and depressing. But I'm gonna hang on to Dr. LaPook's optimism towards the end.
It's not.
I think we are going to get out of this. I do think we'll talk about that one scenario. There are like all these different possibilities, like the play with 3 endings.
Right.
But there is one scenario where we're headed, we're rushing towards the beginning of the end of this, really.
Here, Christine, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if I were in your position, I don't know if there aren't that many professions where you have to take off your mask for a few hours, because you just spent 5 minutes giving great information about masks, and this is no disrespect to anyone here, of course, because we're so happy you're here, but it's a very vulnerable position. You, Dr. LaPook, you had your mask on, but if Christine's in a theater for 2.5 hours without a mask, and there's all these actors that are watching. We have an actress who's about to come on, and then another actor coming on after her. It's like they're in such a vulnerable position. What can we do to keep the performing arts alive and keep these performers that we love so much safe? Because all the crew they can wear masks, but Christine can't.
I mean, Christine, do you feel comfortable talking to your company manager and saying, can we set up filters in these theaters? Or do you think they're just going to go, we can't?
You know what? I do feel comfortable talking to management. They're amazing. I do know also that the venues over the break upgraded all of their HVAC systems. We were hearing about that. So
that's great.
And I think one of our health and safety managers, Tristan Schuler, is watching right now. So I will check in with him tomorrow.
I would just add one more thing about this, because we have to be humble. We don't know to what extent people are being infected, actors are being infected by people in the audience, especially on Broadway, tall ceilings and big, they're back there. Okay. And so we don't know that. It's this theoretical possibility that we'll never know the answer to that. Right. Okay. So you do what you can, you try to make sure you have rules that make sense. But I think where we can start to really maybe be a little bit, all right, let's think about how we do this logically, is backstage. Because we know now that with, and Michael, you've probably seen this too, and Kim, you've probably seen this, that the incubation period of this seems to be getting shorter. I mean, I've had about a half a dozen people this past week who've been double vaxxed, boosted. They've gotten it anyway from another double vaxxed and boosted person. The incubation period was 24 to 36 hours in several of them. They're all doing fine. I called the CDC about this. They said, yeah, it really does seem, we don't have the total stats in, but it looks like there are some that are even less than 24 hours. What that means, and I want to throw this to Michael Mina, is when you're thinking about a testing strategy for people who are coming into the theater, and then they're going backstage, and then at some moment they are taking off their masks and interacting. And it was up until now, that people would sometimes be tested the day before, maybe 2 days before, maybe that morning, come in 10 hours later. But if you have something with such a rapid, it's dividing so quickly, it has such a small, short incubation period, you could theoretically, right, test negative at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then by the time you're taking off your mask with your friends at 6 o'clock at night or whatever it is, suddenly,
or an 8 p.m. evening show,
or 8 p.m. right, whatever. So to me, logically, and I'll throw it to you, Michael, since you've thought such a lot about this, when people come to my house, even my two sons, they're out there. They all know 100% testing the second they get in. We test and they test, and then we take off our mask. I would want, right before somebody is about to take off their mask, them to get a rapid test right then. And it's going to be, and Michael, why don't you take over here and say that chart of yours? It's about 50% sensitive for any virus being there, but it's way more than 90% sensitive for there being enough virus in your nose to infect somebody else. And then you are probably, nothing's 100% safe in terms of infecting somebody else for some number of hours, probably the number of hours that you're going to be in the theater for, which will be, 3 or 4 or something like that. So why don't you take it from there? I think this is super important and has changed.
Yeah, so things are changing, but certainly what you're describing, the generation time of this virus is so short. It's able to transmit very quickly. We're seeing it replicate very fast in the population. This issue, though, is not new in some ways. Of course, going from 4 days to 2 days.
Yeah, that's what's new. That's what I mean is new.
But this is everything I've been saying for 2 years has been trying to say we can't rely on a PCR test 2 days ago or 3 days ago to tell you that you're negative today. That was purely a feature of how long it took for PCR tests to get back. There was no good reason to do a test 3 days ago, except everyone said, we don't have any other tests. So if we're going to ask them to get tested beforehand, we got to give them 3 days. But we've actually had rapid tests available in the world for over a year, almost a year and a half now. And a lot of countries have figured it out that these tests exist. The best time to use a test is right before it is whatever you're doing. And this is right before when you're at the gate on that flight, when you are about to walk into that house for a dinner party. I literally take the test while you're in the driveway in your warm car.
Yeah. 15 minutes
before. Exactly. Right beforehand. That's, the tests aren't perfect, but that massively reduces the risk of you walking in infectious, if you take a test right before, whereas if you take a test a few days earlier, that doesn't do much. I like to think of it, I used to make an analogy that it's kind of like if you were walking through a metal detector in an airport, and then you were allowed to go through security and leave and go back home for 3 days, and then come back to be able to bypass security altogether. Like, well, what is that really doing? And so things are changing a bit. We actually are hearing a bit of, there's this concern that Omicron is so infectious and so transmissible, it made the viral load required to infect others is actually reduced, or the biology of it is such that maybe it's growing faster further down your respiratory tract, so it's not yet in your nose in super high amounts when people actually start transmitting. It will be on day 2, 3, 4, so it's not like rapid tests are useless. But I think it's really important that if somebody's feeling symptomatic, we now have a new thing to our advantage. Many people are now vaccinated. And what's really important there is, what are vaccines supposed to do? They have one job. Okay, they have multiple jobs, but like the major job is for them to get your body to recognize the virus when it first infects you. For most of the last 2 years, all of the data that was accruing was really around people who didn't have pre-existing immunity, especially all the data that looked at the relationship between symptoms and infectiousness. And when the virus started spreading in 2020, people were surprised because they said, oh, it's weird. This virus is spreading before people have any symptoms. And so there was this 2 or 3 day window when people would spread. They'd have high viral load, but then they would spread before symptoms started. The reason is because that's what happens when you're fully naive to the virus. Your immune system takes like 5 days just to realize something's in your body. And then it starts acting, and it's the immune system that causes a lot of the symptoms. So now we're in a different phase of this. We actually have a signal inside of our body that lets us know when we might be getting infected. And it's symptoms, it's cold-like symptoms. Like now we actually have pre-existing immunity. And that's why the symptoms have kind of changed with Omicron. It's not because it's Omicron. It's because we've been vaccinated and previously exposed. That now we're starting to see infections that feel more like cold-like symptoms. Cold-like symptoms happen with respiratory viruses because we've all been infected with them since we were little babies, and so we grow up and have a lot of immunity. So where I'm going with this is that now that Omicron is happening, it could have been Delta, but it's Omicron, and people have a good amount of pre-existing immunity for the most part, at least in wealthy countries, and even in poorer countries, because the virus has spread so much. I mean, I predict that, I estimate that around 200 million Americans have already been infected with this virus. So a lot of people have been infected, a lot of people have been vaccinated. We're getting an early warning sign when we get infected. And so my suggestion to people is, if you feel symptoms, especially these days, it's probably coronavirus. If you're starting to feel symptoms and you're concerned that maybe you have it, err on the side of caution, use a rapid test. But if you're negative, this virus might be transmitting a little bit easier than the other viruses. And so the test might not be fully positive yet, but test again the next day. And it'll probably turn positive. And the important thing then is, symptoms or not, when you're really spreading and shedding a lot, the test will still turn positive. But there is, I think, from the data that I'm seeing and from the anecdotes I'm seeing, that the test might not be detecting people on the very first day of their infectivity. So just a warning, a word of caution, that if you feel symptoms, your test is negative, use another one the next day.
I see.
That's a super important point.
That's a big
brand new thing.
And so stay home if you feel sniffles. I've got the allergies. I've had a few people who've gotten infected by I was with a friend. Yeah, he said, I've got allergies. Have you had allergies before? No. I've got the sniffles. Remember that there are 7 coronaviruses out there, right? 4 of them cause the common cold. And 2 of them are SARS-1, SARS-2. One of them is MERS, the Mideastern Respiratory Syndrome. And I asked Tony Fauci a couple of years ago, those 4 viruses that cause the cold now, could they have started out as devastating as, as COVID? And then over the years, they attenuated and they got weaker. And he said, sure, absolutely. And when you think about it in terms of evolution, if there's a virus that evolves and mutates so that when it infects you 5 minutes later, you're dead. That's an evolutionary dead end for that virus. So it's to the virus's benefit,
right,
to make you less sick, which is what we have seen. The other thing I want to say is be empowered to discuss the COVID protocol. And this, I know it's like, oh, I'm invited to somebody's house, and do I ask? I'd like to know. And I kind of liken it to, seriously, this is not a joke. When you have sexual activity and you're meeting somebody, and everybody wants to know, look, let's get this out of the way. I'm HIV negative or I'm HIV positive, and here are my risk factors, and it's full disclosure. And I think that it's hard socially to bring up the subject a lot of the times, but maybe that's a filter for people who you don't want to be around if they make you feel bad for discussing what the COVID protocol is. So that's like a little philosophical point.
Dr. LaPook, I know that Dr. Prather and Dr. Mina have more to say, and Christine, we want to thank you, but we want to bring on our next guest, and I have a feeling that the points that people want to, things will cross, because we all have many of the same overlapping questions. So Christine, thank you so much for coming on.
See you, Christine. Good luck.
Love your show.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
All right. Seth, you want to bring on our next guest?
Yes, she is so brilliant. She just came on my radio show 2 weeks ago, and I played for her, and I completely flipped out over her voice. She's currently starring in the title role in Waitress. She plays a waitress. Please welcome the amazing Ciara Renée. Hi, Ciara.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ciara.
Hi. Wow. I feel like I'm learning. I'm like literally over here taking notes. I've been watching the whole time. I'm so grateful for all of you guys, because things have really popped off again, and I've been so stressed. And I know I'm not alone in this. Everyone I'm working with, we feel so overwhelmed all of a sudden, because it's like it feels very reminiscent of March 2020.
Yeah.
So feeling a little triggered tonight, but glad to be getting some information. So thank you.
So Ciara, do you listening? Because I know that you've been backstage here, waiting to come on. What's your situation, and what are you scared of? What questions can you ask that maybe would at least give you information on best decisions moving forward for you? I'm sure it will inform other people watching.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sort of in an interesting place tonight specifically. The show is happening right now, and I decided to not participate tonight. So who knows if I'll get in trouble for this. But I did not feel comfortable. And the reason for that is because of some positive cases. And they've just been multiplying as the days go on. And, obviously the protocol, I guess, that's been figured out with equity is, as long as you continue to test and people get their rapid tests, and the rapid tests say that they're negative, then they can continue to come into work. Now, you guys have sort of been talking about this is what I'm wondering is what is the difference between the rapid and the PCR? Because if someone tests positive on the rapid, which we do by 11 a.m., which is a long time before we get on stage, a lot of times, unless we're doing a matinee show. If they test positive, then they have to go and get a rapid PCR, the Acula test. And I've been doing those tests every day as well as the rapid test, just to be safe, because I have been in contact with people now twice who have COVID, who are positive. And I am, because of the demands of my role, I am not able to wear a mask at any point during the 2.5 hours of the show, except for intermission. And I interact with everyone. And so that is why I pulled myself out tonight, and I pulled myself out previously, because even though I've continued to test negative, I don't know how far away from each person, each interaction I have to be. And I don't know how much I can trust the tests. And if everyone's not getting PCR'd, then is it enough to just do the rapids? That's sort of all my questions.
So Ciara, because it sounds like a Dr. Mina question for sure, but I'm sure Dr. Prather has some points. Let me just ask you for clarity. So you're saying that you do a test at 11 a.m., a rapid antigen test at 11 a.m. Everyone in the cast does on a 2-show day, or on a show that you only have one at 7 or 8 o'clock?
Correct.
Okay, so 11 a.m. So a minimum of 3 hours has gone by between that test and a matinee, but 9 hours between that test and the 8 p.m. show, and it actually really 12 hours because the show is over close to 11 p.m. So really, we're talking 12 hours.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so Dr. Mina, take
we're
it
not
away.
gonna like your answer. Go.
No, so certainly, I think that being tested is first. It's about testing is not going to protect yourself. It's going to protect the people around you, and that's the first thing to recognize. And it will, in a circular way, it will protect yourself. If everyone is testing, then that whole environment becomes much less likely to have a lot of virus in it. But certainly, I would say, if it's a little hard to talk about your specific situation because you have such ready access to amazing tests. The Acula test you referred to and the rapid antigen test, sounds like you have a lot of tests at your disposal, which is amazing. It's really good. And that's, that shows that your employers or whoever is providing them is caring, is really trying to make the environment safe. And I very much appreciate that. The more you test, the better. I think, frankly, if you're worried that you've been exposed and you don't want to go and get the people around you exposed, there is in every single person's infection, there's a point where everyone goes from negative to positive. And it happens in a moment, essentially a couple minutes, maybe, when you can finally start to see that line and it says, oh, I'm positive. Mm-hmm. And when you put it in that, I get a lot of people asking me a lot of questions frequently, which is, how long before, or how long does a test say I'm negative for? Mm-hmm. What it comes down to is really a probability game. And it's like, if you're constantly being exposed and you're sure that you've been infected yesterday, but you're just waiting to see the test pop positive, mm-hmm. then, every minute counts. But if you're, so we have to kind of take a population level approach to this and say, what's reasonable? What is actually manageable to people? And is a test every 4 hours reasonable and manageable for you? And if so, I personally think the tests are pretty darn easy to do. I don't mind just doing a simple swab. And for me, I don't care. But I have plenty of tests in my home. You have plenty of tests at your work. And so for you, I would say if you have a reason to think you might be exposed, you might have been exposed and you really don't want to get your coworkers exposed, then using them on a frequent basis. For the average person in America, it's a little bit of a different equation. It's, do I use this test? How do I use it? When do I use it? And I would say the only good answer is use it right before whatever it is you're doing. I mentioned that before. And but if you have 2 tests per day, I guess the easiest way to say it is if you are negative right now, it's a lot less likely that you're infectious right now or within the next 8 hours. Is it possible you become infectious? Yes. Is it possible you are currently infectious? It is possible. Is it much more likely that if you are infectious, that your line will be bright red? Yes. So that it's a little bit hard we like to always ask the question, if I'm negative, then what? But the reality is what's really good about these tests is if they're positive, then you're positive. Mm-hmm. And that's in some ways, that's the most important thing. If you're positive, stay home, don't go to work. If you're negative, it's always a probability game. Are you going to be positive in 2 hours? It could be 8 hours. It could be 8 months.
Right. I think what's difficult with our schedule is that, we can't test 15 minutes before we open the show, because if I were to be at the show and 15 minutes before the show, or even 30 minutes before the show, I tested positive, I've already been in contact with a bunch of people, like my dresser and everybody. I mean, they're masked, but I've already been in contact with these people. And then the entire show has to work then to get the understudy on, or whoever is going to go on in my place, or figure out if that's even possible, if there's coverage, if there's, if we'd have to bring someone in. So it's we're sort of at this, we have to do it with enough time, but also without being too far away.
That was going to be my question. What is not having been backstage very often, except in Camp Algonquin, where I was in a couple of the camp productions, I have to say. But I digress. What what is the earliest time? Let's say an 8 o'clock show.
Mhm.
Is it 5 o'clock? Is it 4 o'clock? Is it 6 o'clock? Where, that right before testing where I'm positive, I haven't taken my mask off yet, and there's enough time to get the understudy in. And is the understudy just waiting to go on, or they have to come in from Paramus, New Jersey, or wherever they have to come in from? So those are the logistic questions, and I think probably Michael and Kim want to know that too, because that's how you think about it.
Sure. I mean, in general, there is always an understudy or a standby who's in the building. What gets difficult is it's like if I plus the understudy plus somebody else, but we all were to test positive at a certain point, then that would tank the show or whatever. But I mean, for just me personally, like I always try to get there about an hour before the show anyway. So it would have to be, for me, it would have to be an hour before the show. And I think that would hopefully give everybody enough time. So if everybody got tested an hour before the show, okay, maybe that's the way to do it. Currently, though, the protocol is, again, to get the rapid in the morning. And now we're all being asked to go get the rapid PCRs. Which that's my other question is like, is the rapid PCR a better test, and should we just be doing those?
So the rapid PCR, like the MESA, which is really there's two rapid PCRs. There's the MESA Acula test that you're talking about.
Yes.
And the Abbott ID Now.
Okay.
Those are expensive machines with, that you have to, they're not the kind of distributed rapid test that anyone could use.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I do not use, I have access to both, but to give you an example of what I do, I use the rapid antigen tests all the time. And if I have a reason to be concerned, like recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had symptoms, and I didn't turn positive on an antigen test. And so I said, well, that's interesting. Let me see. And so I used a whole bunch of different molecular tests. I didn't turn positive on any test, so I didn't have COVID, but I was able to test myself on all kinds of machines. And the important thing there is I had a reason to believe it, that I might have had COVID. It raised my risk level and my potential for being infected. And so I thought I should use a more expensive molecular test at that moment. If I have access all the time to these better tests, like the best of the best is certainly if you can have PCR quality in a in a rapid format, then go for it. That's a great idea. And I would say, for places that have that, then do it. The NFL has done it. Hollywood has done it. Broadway is doing it. And so, but I guess I'm trying to temper how I talk to your question with how I recognize that Americans at large or people at large are hearing this.
Sure.
Because yes, it's important to, if you have access, go for it. It's going to give you a few hours. With Omicron, it will give you a few hours extra to know, like if you think of the viral load curve, it kind of goes, it's growing and growing, and that grows exponentially real fast inside of you. And so maybe the PCR test will turn positive here, and then the antigen test will turn positive here. In time, that might just be like a 4 or 8 hour difference. But for you on Broadway, when you're really trying to figure out, do I go on stage?
Right.
And that is an important amount of time, and especially next to it all the time, it can be really critical. It's just, I don't want people to think that the testing that they're doing at home, because, if people have tests that they can do once or twice a week, just because they can't get PCR tests, these tests will turn positive when you have a lot of virus in you, like the less expensive paper strip tests.
Yeah.
So those are still really, really good. And so what I say is, you know what, if you're positive on one of those and you think you might have been exposed, then assume that you're positive and stop your transmission chains right there. But if in your case, you're trying to make sure that a Broadway production can go on, then definitely the molecular test gives you an added layer of security, I would say.
And I think,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And this is just for me, and I'm not exactly sure who all the audience is here, but since
I would say, Ciara, I'll stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
Because to Dr. Mina's point, our audience, there are definitely people that are not in the performing arts, but are lovers of the performing arts watching But really, our aim for doing the show was because we have spoken to many actors
Right.
over the last couple of months, and especially in the last couple of days, who are very concerned.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're doing it. So in a way, I know it's kind of unusual, but we actually kind of do want the answers.
So
to be
let's take off on that and build on what Michael said. And I think Ciara, you'll want to. This may be where you're going.
Okay.
And I know it's already after 9, so I want to make sure we get to this.
And we have one more guest, by the way, who's standing by.
Michael brought up the question of there's what you do for the population. Okay, that's very important. But now we're talking about Broadway. How do we keep Broadway open? We don't want Broadway to close for any number of reasons. So can we talk about and whether it's now or with the next guest, both from Kim's point of view in terms of the aerosol science, again, and then from Michael in terms of the testing, this whole issue of, well, it sounds like you're tested at 11 a.m. Could you be tested again at 7 p.m. when you get in, or right before that issue? It's not what you would do there's not enough tests available for everybody to do that,
right.
But we're talking about an industry that's really important that you want to try to keep open. And then Kim, I wanted you to expand on, I love that, the Maginot line of air filters in front, between you and the audience,
right?
And then backstage maybe also, because this issue of, and again, I don't think any of us have been in the theater and sitting there with the CO2 monitors and figuring out, filtration rates and all that stuff, but just theoretically to make some sort of input here.
So you want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So I mean,
Please.
I was waiting. No. So I just, the thing is that the person, I think was it Christina before you, had said something about, it's depressing. It shouldn't be. I mean, I understand I understand the fear and the apprehension, and I'm really sorry that you are in a vulnerable position. But as John and I have said 1,000 times in our interviews, this is a fixable problem. This virus is in the air. Once you say it's in the air, there are ways, there's multiple ways, multiple tools in your toolkit to get it out. And so it's when you're not sure how it's getting transmitted that it's scary, but we know how it's being transmitted. So just address it, right? And so, there's the ventilation that was mentioned, and some places are, upgrading their HVAC and all that. I think that's really important, but you need more. And it's also kind of slow. If you had a super infectious person in the front row, it would take a while to get it out. It might get to you first, right? So that's where the filtration. I helped a school district open with over 100,000 kids, and kids came to school and tested positive often, and they didn't have any outbreaks in any classroom because they had filtration just distributed about. So I've become more and more of a believer in the fact that you can be protected without a mask. Your mask is a filter, but if you don't have that filter, then use the other filter, right? And so it's not rocket science. It's doable, but people just have to really, do it right. And so that would be my advice, is to just make sure. And again, so I always say masks are your first line of defense, which is still true. And you'd want to be wearing it as much as you can when you're not on the stage and you're backstage, right? Have a really good one and know that it's a good one. But then once you have to take off your mask, you are in a vulnerable position. The other question I had for you, though, is I know there's some difference in people in the audience are required to wear masks, but then I've also heard that at some shows that there's like a section where they can eat and take off or drink and they can take off their mask. Do you have that, or they have to wear their mask the whole time?
No, we do. I mean, I guess people have drinks, like they are allowed to, I guess, drink, but I mean, no, there isn't like a specific section for that, as far as I can see. Yeah.
Unfortunately, there was supposed to be, but now it's kind of just random throughout the audience.
Yeah, Kim, Dr. Prather, it's sort of like with theaters around the country, not just on Broadway. It's sort of like the 50 states of the United States. Every state does something a little bit different. Yeah, that unfortunately is the case with Broadway theaters and theaters around the country.
And it would be so interesting if our union maybe made it standardized, but that hasn't happened.
Yeah, but you should if they don't want you to have to pull out, then just putting a line of filters right between, like set people back and put filters. It's not going to, pretty sure it's going to be a low chance. It's never zero that it's going to cross that filter line. So,
Well, that's good to know. And please call Equity and tell them.
Ciara,
And Michael, what about the testing maybe twice in a day if it's Broadway and they have the resources to do that?
Yeah. So I'm glad that this was clarified for me. I'm so used to talking, like you, John, like to the masses who aren't Broadway. But absolutely, to be very clear, if we're talking about Broadway itself, what I would do if I were creating a reasonable testing scheme to try to keep people as safe as possible, I would use if I had the resources, I would use an Accula test in the moment I got to work, and I would use an Accula test halfway through the day, like when you're still in time to call out, to change.
Right. So the tough part is the Acculas take up to, and they've been generally taking 2 hours to get the results.
No, because they're So what I would okay, I'll give you my full version. Here's like what I would really do. I would use a rapid test at home, a Binex now kind of rapid test. These simple cards. If it's part of an employer test program, just to be clear, I'm about to talk about the company I work for, conflict of interest, everything like that. But if employers don't want people to come to work on the honor system, use a rapid test that's an authenticated, verified version of that rapid test, where you can, just like we're talking here, you can authenticate, yes, Ciara used the test in the morning, and then you can show a pass. And that's good for all the staff members, everyone that comes onto the stage for Broadway. So then you've had a test that you've been able to use at home that automatically, if it's negative, it automatically greatly reduces the chances you're actually infectious. Then you get to work and you use the rapid PCR test, and that really does buy you pretty much the entire day. Because if you're still negative on one of those Accula tests in the morning, it's really unlikely that you're going to be, that you happen to.
Well, you've done the Binex in the morning. Now you're coming to work later, maybe 7 o'clock at night. So there's no time for the PCR. There would just be time for another Binex. Am I right about that, Ciara?
No, I think that's correct. So I think maybe what's being said, and correct, this is me just trying to learn here. So if we took the Accula midday, right? So with enough time to get the information back before 6:30 or 7 o'clock, right? Or before 4:35, whatever, before the show starts, that would actually be the best way to do it. Yes. Because like you said, the Accula is going to pick it up just a smidge sooner, infectious wise, before the antigen does.
So 3 or 4 o'clock for an 8 o'clock show. I want to give specific.
No, so sometimes we have 7 o'clock shows and sometimes we have 8 o'clock.
Okay. So say you 4 hours before whenever the curtain goes up, and that takes 2 hours, leaves you 2 hours to get the understudy. I'm just
I think that's a great plan. And then what I would add is, if in those 2 hours while waiting, you're able to wear an N95, because it's super easy, then do it. If you're not able to, then maybe you do want to use the Binex now right before you come to work, because that's only 10 minutes. You can do that in the car.
Great. So yeah.
Ciara, I was going to say, can we add one more person? Because I know we're running out of time. You can stay on. Please stay on.
Okay.
Seth, do you want to introduce our next guest?
So we have the title character from Waitress, and now we have the title character from Hamilton. Please welcome Miguel Cervantes. Hi, Miguel.
Hello, friends. Am I on? Can you hear me?
You're on.
Yes. We know your show was just canceled, Miguel. We can hear
I know.
you.
Well, it's crazy that Ciara. Hey, Ciara, what's going on?
Hey.
To hear someone talking about that their show's still going on when we have been shut down now through the 26th, and also to speak to the unbelievable differences between one Broadway show to the next and what they do and how they're doing it. We test. I'll give you the sort of download of what happened. And Dr. Mina, are you Doctor? Dr. Mina? Is that? Yeah. Okay, great. I was going to call you doctor anyway, so it didn't matter.
He's a physician.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
Dr. Rudetsky and Dr. Wesley, continue.
All the doctors, everyone's doctor. We were testing, and we went down on Wednesday, and, I had a very terrible feeling. I was on stage March 11th, 2020, and I came off stage that night at the end of the show thinking, this feels funny. It doesn't feel like we're going to come back tomorrow. And again, on Wednesday evening, I came off stage and I thought, wow, this does not feel like we're coming back tomorrow. And it certainly was true for us anyway, as other shows were finding out. What happened with us is we were doing antigen tests, everybody at half hour as of the last 2 weeks. Everyone.
And wait, how often you were doing it?
Every day. As of the last 2 weeks. Prior to that, we had gone to like 2-3 times a week because I said these words.
Half hour? What was half hour?
At half hour.
What time?
Half hour before the show.
Half hour before the show.
Half hour before the show.
And listen, Ciara's very nice, and I think she's a beautiful person for saying that we should really care for our give our crew time, and there should be plenty of time. But in our industry, people get hurt, people get injured. There is a way to switch people quickly. They do it periodically. It's not the best case scenario. It's really terrible for our crew, and God love these people for working as hard as they do. But it is done. So in that regard, I can't believe that there was a situation where you were testing so far in the morning for an evening show. Mm-hmm. But that's just me but again, there was no sort of blanket, uniform. Here's how we're going to do it to keep everyone safe.
Right.
There's different companies.
But that's confusing to me, because what I keep being told is that this is what the epidemiologist for equity has lined up for us and has said as the protocol. So if that's not the case, that's a big kind of statement to make. Or are there like several different versions of this
unclear.
That the company can
unclear?
So I can speak a little bit to that. I would say that there isn't one way to do all of this. There's a lot of people who are trying to balance resources, balance all these different features that we're talking about. There are optimal ways if you have unlimited resources to do it. And, unfortunately, this is actually a fairly tricky topic to just talk. I mean, the CDC has been wrong on this almost the entire pandemic. The FDA has been wrong, it's just true. They took a long time to get up to speed. And that meant that a lot of the information that a lot of epidemiologists and physicians and other people that you trust have been a little bit misguided at different parts of this, because it is very tricky, and it's actually an extremely niche topic that people before the pandemic, there was like no science around this, none. I'm in the middle, like I'm writing a textbook about testing during a pandemic because it doesn't exist, which is surprising, but it truly doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so on the one hand, you got to kind of give people a break for having, policy that maybe isn't optimal. But on the other hand, you should hold people accountable and say, are you getting the best advice from the best people?
I mean, but listen, here's the bottom line. They're doing it that way. They're still open. We're doing it this way, and we're closed. But
can I ask you?
But what I'm going to say is that there's not like a uniform way to keep it going, because we were testing every day and we don't know where it came from. We don't actually know if people were spreading it on stage that night, Kim. Were people spitting it out and everyone's just sucking it up as they go by? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I am negative. I'm on stage the entire time. I've got booster, Moderna, all three. About 2 weeks ago was my booster. And I talked to everyone, and I didn't get it. And so I'm not sure sort of, where the testing meets the just,
So to add to what Michael was saying and what Kim's implied earlier, it's a moving target here. And we love in science to say 2 + 2 is 4. I am really certain of that. But here, there are so many big variables and micro variables that are impossible to control and impossible to predict. And this is where you get back to, again, this statistical probability that it's going to work, knowing it may not work. You may get unlucky. Luck be a lady tonight. I mean, you may get unlucky, on one of the.
But the test is after the train has left the station, right? And so to me, I'm all about prevention, not cure, right? Or whatever, detect and then cure. And so what I don't know, and Miguel, if you is there any consistency in the ventilation or filtration? Do they talk about
that? Everyone has filters in their rooms. No one ever is without. Listen, Hamilton, they're not messing around.
That's
They're
great.
not messing around. We have, I can't remember the names of them, but we have rapid PCRs, the one with the little machine that you do the thing and the lights come on. Lumira, Luma something. I don't know. Lucira. And we do those periodically. We've been doing those every day now. Well, now that we're down, but no one is allowed to have their mask off if they are not on stage. No one. And to say that, I don't think, and you can't quote me on this, but I don't think very many crew people were infected. This is a majority cast problem. Which is, you know, and to say this, just to your point earlier, on Wednesday, a lot of people tested negative antigen at half hour, but tested positive PCR in between shows on Wednesday.
At half hour before the matinee.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so did you guys close or cancel for the amount of shows that you have because you didn't have adequate coverage, or just because you had a positive or any positive cases?
These are questions above my pay grade. We started to get positives, and then as more and more positives came, we had positives on Wednesday, but we had enough negatives that we were good to go. As the positives began to pile up, I think then it became a question of safety, and down the road, and I believe this honestly, down the road it became, you know, coverage, and can we still do the show? Because all of a sudden it started to look like it was much more serious than at first they thought. Because we were testing every day, because we thought we knew what was happening. What I don't know is, maybe you can tell me this, Dr. Mina, is there a way to know if this is Omicron or Delta or what we do? We all spit in a cup also Wednesday.
Well, now it's 75% Omicron, and it's going to soon be 100% with a doubling time of 1.5 to 2 days. But I think, you know, with time running out, maybe this is the moment to say, clearly the people who are involved with your shows, you know, we're trying. You know, I want to go back to this. You know, everybody's trying their best. We really have to have empathy here. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, how can I get the cast infected? You know, everybody's trying, but it's really hard. You even hear us adjusting. Well, maybe, you know, what's very clear or what the aerosol scientists are saying, what Kim says, you know, suck it out of the air. That can't hurt. You know, I haven't had a cold in a year and a half, you know, wearing the masks. So, you know, the respiratory viruses are in the air, cleaning the air. There's no controversy, no downside. That's a slam dunk. The testing, as you're hearing from Michael, who is a total expert on this, you know, it depends. What are the resources? How often you want to do it? What time does the show stop? And then there's still some questions. So for the people listening who want to know, is there a path for Broadway to stay open? I think I will start and then I will finish. I'll leave it to the two of you to sort of finish this up, which is one possible scenario that people are talking about is that this is kind of how the pandemic ends or heads towards ending, which is super infectious, but hopefully if we get lucky and another variant doesn't pop up that's deadlier, a less deadly version. For people who are vaccinated and boosted, the odds are they'll do statistically much better. They'll still less likely to have serious illness unless they have an underlying condition, immunocompromise, all the things that we know about, right? So it's going to be people who are unvaccinated who are going to really get into trouble with this. Maybe the likelihood of one person getting really sick is less with Omicron than Delta, but if you have millions of people getting infected, then that's going to mean a lot of people in the hospital, a lot of people dying. And if you follow that up with the flu season, there's going to be a big load on the healthcare system. But after that, you see these vertical curves. Have you seen them? It's just straight up. Normally, we saw with Deltas like that. This is like straight up. It might come straight down or have a slope that's steeper going down. Right now, we're at over 100,000. People are talking about having more than 500,000 or more cases a day. When that happens, as Michael said, he thought hundreds of millions have already been either infected or immunized. We might now have a bunch of the this is all positive. A bunch of the country immunized through infection,
Can I ask you a question about, can I jump in and ask about that? So listen, Hamilton, we've had a lot of cast. All of a sudden, we will come back in a few weeks and we'll have this like immunity, right? It'll be sort of like a micro version of what you're saying. Like it will have happened. People have gotten through it. No one will have gotten serious. And we get back into the building and we have this version of this is the new normal, right? Where there's this virus that has sort of become part of our lives.
Yeah.
What do we do now?
Yeah, well, that's the end of what I was going to say, which is that this infection for these people will act as a booster. And maybe you get down to the less than 10,000 cases a day that Tony Fauci talks about, where it's endemic, meaning it's not going away. We're never going to eradicate it like we did smallpox. It's in animals. It ain't going away totally. But if you can get it down to an area where a level where the risk is enough that we can see it in the rearview mirror, then we can start thinking about that as a pathway. If we're lucky, if another variant doesn't come that is even worse, that is deadlier, then that might be a pathway towards getting out of the pandemic. It might be, it ends with a roar rather than a whimper.
What about those of us that have not gotten it yet?
Well, I have a feeling, I sort of said this at the end of my piece. I kind of think I'm not at all surprised if I'm going to get infected. I kind of expect I'm going to get infected. What I don't want to do is get infected in the next 10 days because I'm about to see my 99-year-old father-in-law who I love. So I want to be able to control that, which we can do through these layers of protection that we talked about at the beginning. We know what they are. I can be a lunatic for the next, whatever. I can be super strict with the N95s. When I'm taking a car, I'm wearing the N95. But at some point, I'm going to come out of that. I'm going to probably be less strict, and I'll probably run into the virus at some point. And being boosted, I'll either have no symptoms, or I hope I'll have some mild symptoms. Hopefully, I can test and know that to not spread it to somebody else. But I shouldn't end up in the hospital, and then I'll be boosted, and I'll do better. So,
hold on, Dr. LaPook. I'm going to interrupt because Miguel, tell me if I'm inside your head, and then you can clarify what I'm about to say. Is that I don't know how many members of your cast are positive or who is positive, but let's say in any cast, a quarter of them are positive now, and there's not enough coverage, and the show has to shut down. Who's to say in 2 weeks later that a different 25% of the cast is going to get it, and then 2 weeks after that, another 25%? At what point? I think that's part of the stress. Am I right, Miguel?
Stress that it's unpredictable, but remember, I think the next month or two are going to be really tough, and I think it's going to spread through, and it might be in waves like that very well. But I think 3 to 4 months from now, I know we keep pushing it out, like that. But and tell me what you think, Michael and Kim. I think by then it'll have gone up and start to be really significantly down by the early spring. But tell me, Michael, what you think, and tell me, and as the epidemiologist, and then Kim, I'm going to give you the final swing at this, because I do think at the end of the day, you've been very consistent from the time of our first interview, June 1st, 2020, saying it's in the air. We got to take it out of the air. We have the tools. We can fix this. And how relevant is all this for theaters where, guess what, there's a lot of air? Michael, why don't you talk about how does this pandemic end in your mind, whether that's a reasonable potential scenario, so that people feel, okay, this is not a year ago, and it is not, the beginning of the pandemic. We're not back to the very beginning of this. I do not think if I get infected, I'm going to die. Whereas I thought that was a real possibility when I went on the COVID wards in April of 2020. I thought, okay, I could get infected and die, like I felt like I did back in the days of AIDS in March of 1981 when I was seeing patients. We didn't know where it was coming from. And I'm starting IVs where I could stick myself, and I didn't know if it was in the air. Michael.
Yeah, it's part of it is what makes the decision making these days so much more complicated, is that it's a complex, relationship. Like March 2020, we shut everything down, and that was a simple answer because there was so much confusion. Now we know that everyone's been vaccinated. Most people are going to do just fine. We know that a fraction of people aren't going to do fine. So it makes the
vaccinated and boosted.
Yeah, and in general, just a fraction, whether you're vaccinated, a bigger fraction if you're unvaccinated, are not
20 times more likelihood of dying. I just want to make that to people to know. Get vaccinated and boosted. It's very clear.
Yeah. So in any case, the only off-ramp we've ever had of this pandemic, the only one, there isn't another one, is to get immunological memory into us. And that's going to be through a combination of some vaccines and a lot of exposures. Ideally those exposures come after the vaccines, but we can't help them. Omicron is going to blow through everyone. We'll probably see a crash at the end of January. This is so fast. It's going to be a very sharp peak. And that's going to expose a lot of people. Delta already exposed a lot of people. And where we are, the whole problem with this pandemic is that you have to think of us like little babies immunologically with this virus. Only babies can tolerate viruses like this. We're evolutionarily able to tolerate them. Our tissue regenerates really fast when we're babies because we're growing so fast. So babies are able to tolerate it. And over the first years of life, for any respiratory virus, babies build up this cushion immunity. And by the time they get to 4 or 5 years old, you see infant and childhood mortality drop off, and kids generally do pretty well. So we're kind of going through the same phase of building up our immunity like babies normally do, but we're unfortunately doing it in vulnerable stages of our life. But nevertheless, we're doing it. We're slogging through it. And we will get that off-ramp. And the off-ramp, the only one that exists here, the virus is never going away. Just put it out of your mind. But the importance of the virus to us as humans is rapidly diminishing. It's going to keep going down and down and down to the point where it's background noise. And that's because we'll all build up cushion and cushion and cushion of immunity. The only people who are going to have the most trouble doing that are the people who are already older, just because it's hard for older, 70, 75, 80, 85-year-olds to keep immunological memory. I like to think of immune memory like our real memory. And if you try to teach somebody who's 80 a new language, it's super difficult. It's nearly impossible. Try to teach a little baby a new language, they remember it for life. And so it's very similar with immunological memory. In fact, it's all cells and pluses and minuses and stuff. And so we're going to get there as a majority of a population. We will get the off-ramp, and it's probably going to happen in the middle of this next year.
And of course, the immunocompromised, we can't forget. They may be younger, but unable to have an immune response.
And it's the same, but the immunocompromised are the same all the time. We always have to protect the immunocompromised from infectious diseases. I agree fully. Yeah.
Dr. Prather?
Thank you. Dr. Prather, Kim, I'll answer to both. So just a couple of things. One thing is, I just think that one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that we are now paying attention to indoor air quality, and we should clean it. We don't drink dirty water. We don't drink water with pathogens in it. So why should we breathe air? And we can take it out of air just as well as we can take it out of water. In fact, we're exposed to like 4,000 times more air in a day, over a day than we are the water, right? Yet somehow it's okay. And indoors is where we spend all our time. So I'm pushing hard to try and, I'm on a couple of National Academy committees to set standards for indoor air. It's time. So I'm pushing for that. But if we do that, we just accept that in, the winter, we're all going to be sick. I haven't been sick in 2 years. All of these viruses are airborne, and we put up with them, and we thought that, it was okay. So I think that's a problem.
But it was inevitable. We all thought it was inevitable.
Yeah, you just kind of accepted it, but it's crazy if you think about it. And so the other thing is, I forgot to mention my little handy dandy sensor. You should have this, and there it goes. This is what they're putting up in businesses in Japan. It's a CO2 reading. It tells you how fresh your air is. The closer it is to 400, this magic number, that's outdoors. It's like being outdoors where you're pretty safe, much lower risk, right? So
and indoors, you want it like under 1,000 indoors, something like that?
Yeah, I say under 800 usually, but 1,000 I would live with. But I don't go anywhere. If I walk in, I take this on airplanes. I've got the restaurants, a few that I've gone in. I take it in stores. This thing will hit 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. I'm out of there. I'm just gone. And so you can use this as a truth teller for the people that you work with too, right? And so you have one, yeah. So I just think that this is my safety net, a big one. This is ventilation.
It's not filtration, it's ventilation.
This is ventilation. Yeah. And so it just tells you how fresh your air is. By adding the filters, this won't go down because the filters are taking out the aerosols. So that, that's another major one. I do that one too, but that's
and
not
Kim, just so people know, it's measuring CO2, it's carbon dioxide. So since you exhale it, the more people, the more, it's filling in the air, the better the ventilation, the better the CO2 comes down. So that's right. Sorry, keep going.
Right. It has to do with you're sharing the air. Indoors, you're sharing the air. And the higher this number gets, you know. And so I would want to know. I wouldn't be performing without a mask without knowing what this number was. And you want to do it when people there. You want to do it when people are there. They'll try and do it. Oh, we did it before the show starts. If people aren't in the room, then how the heck's the number going to get higher, right? So don't fall
Show
for that
the Japanese pic. David, do you have the Japan thing that Kim gave us? There it is.
This is movie theaters. That's the numbers in movie. So you decide whether your movie theater room that you go in is safe. They should have this for every, in the window of every Broadway show.
Wow.
Why don't we have this?
Isn't that cool?
Ciara,
I saw that today for the first time.
I want it. I want it now.
It's doable. It's not hard.
Listen, I'm going to ask one very serious question about my job. Kim, after the show, people are lined up and they want to say hello. They want a picture. They want to say, and what I've been doing is I would go out and I'll be like, I'll keep my mask on and I'll fist bump everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll stand behind them and I'll take my mask off like 4 or 5 feet behind them so that they can take a selfie with me behind them. How do you feel about this?
Aerosols, dear.
Outside.
Aerosols go far.
Outside.
Is it outside?
But
outside, I'd feel okay. Outside, I feel better.
Outside at the stage door, outside.
And it all sort of depends because aerosols can go behind too, right? They do U-turns, unfortunately. Droplets drop, but aerosols can fill that space. So if you're sure that, if it's really crowded, it could kind of, this one is getting a little trickier because it's just more infectious.
And then
I'd be
my
nervous.
question goes to Dr. Mina, like, if I have not been infected and I'm doing this,
you're fine.
I am at more of a risk of catching the thing.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, sort of. Well, at least getting sick from it,
like
If
that. I want to know, like,
if you
where
have lower amount of immunity, I would say
do I
that.
want to get coronavirus right now? Is the question, so that I don't have to worry about it later.
Well,
it's a terrible question to ask.
You've been vaccinated and boosted, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're really going like on these crazy paths of like, when should I get infected if I'm going to be infected? Because we're all going to be infected, and we probably, most of us on this call have been, or exposed anyway.
Right.
Get vaccinated, get boosted, and 2 months after your boost, if I were creating a laboratory experiment and I had to say, when would people be the safest to be exposed if they're going to be exposed? It would be like, month and a half, 2 months after their booster, because you'd have a lot of good antibodies still. And that exposure, I'm not recommend. This is because the question was asked. I'm not recommending.
Please follow this with a but.
If you're going to get it, that's one of the.
But we have to. I want to be very clear about this. And I know Michael was saying, but I'm not. We are not recommending that. People have been asking this left and right. Should we do the chickenpox and measles experiment? Where put everybody in a room. The answer is because we don't know what's going to happen. And if you're unlucky, how lucky are you feeling today?
That's what I'm wondering. Is like, I haven't had it so far as I can tell. Oh, and I know a lot of people who are long haulers and have had long-term effects that have still not gone away. And I am so nervous about diminished lung capacity. I'm so nervous about brain fog and depression because I don't need any more of that. Like I have enough on my own.
Listen, we have people with boosters who are actually sick, who are very sick in our group.
You can catch it again.
Question is,
you can catch it more than once.
Right, and that's my question is. Do we have any numbers on like people who are vaccinated, like how many of them are having these long-term side effects that aren't going away?
It's too soon.
There was one study that showed that with Delta, there was about a 50% lower chance of getting long haul. However, if you think about the odds of long haul being 10 to 30%, depending on the study, and it goes down to 5 to 15%, I don't like that. Now, we don't know what it is for Omicron. But the NIH, and I've spoken to Francis Collins, who just the fabulous former now head, I think as of today, or former head of the NIH, about this. They're spending billions on long haul. They a big study, and I think one of the other silver linings is that long haul is probably caused. We think by you get the infection, and then the infection's out of you, but your body doesn't know it's out of you, so it's still attacking your own body because something in the virus resembles something in your brain or in another part of your body, and it's still going after it. think about people with chronic Lyme and chronic fatigue syndrome and a lot of these things that have been kind of, it's in your head. It's not in your head. These are real. And I think we're really going to shed light on these other problems by doing the research on long haul. So long haul is a big deal. And I agree with you. And Kim was saying, yeah, I feel that way too. I don't want to get infected because I don't want to have a chance of long haul. So it's not like I'm saying,
I totally agree.
I want to go walk into the infection and get it. I'm going to do the best I can, but I also know that the odds are with something this infectious ripping through the population, I could very well get infected, may not even have symptoms. I am very low chance of getting seriously ill. And I'm now okay as a human being in terms of worrying about it. Whereas when in April of 2020 on the COVID wards at NYU Langone, I was afraid. I was frightened. And I'm not frightened now. It could happen, but I'm not frightened, the way I was.
Dr. Prather.
Yeah,
I want to get there. I want to get there.
One quick question. I looked quickly at the chat, which I missed through the night. It was actually really interesting. But there's a lot of people asking about the CO2 sensor. There's a website that has tons of information on. There it is, cleanaircrew.org, and that has information on the CO2 sensors, filtration boxes you can build for $70. Like we build them for the university. There's all kinds of information on there. It also has I think it has a coupon that takes the price down by $50. So it's about, I think it's $200 with the coupon and $250 without for the one that I use. And there's ones that don't work so well. I have to warn you. So this is the one that me and all that sort of, I have no conflict. I just know it works. So I just want to mention that because there's a lot. I did see there was quite a few questions about it.
Thank you, Dr. Prather. Miguel and Ciara, before we go, I almost feel like I'm going to put an unfair burden on you because I know you're the leads in two of the biggest shows ever on Broadway, and you're on here, and I feel like there are actors watching you right now, and will be after this airs. It's still on Stars in the House YouTube channel.
We had some actors that wanted to come on that weren't allowed by their quote unquote teams.
That weren't allowed to come on.
We appreciate you guys coming on.
And so I feel like you two are in a position to ask, the questions as we wrap up here. If there's anything else that you want to ask or say for people, especially for people that are watching that are in the ensembles of shows.
It's always so difficult. And as I've gotten older, I've sort of begun to realize that everybody has different priorities, right? And everyone sees things differently. And we're in such a collaborative business. And, I felt very strongly that the show should not go on tonight, given the cases. And in fact, one person tested positive during the show. Because
you mean tonight as we've been on?
Mm-hmm. So I believe I was right. And what's tough is that, like I've been saying, kind of putting it in there, that we don't have a blanket, we don't have a protocol. We don't have that. And our union should be making that a thing. And I understand that things are shifting and moving. And so we have to be flexible. And I realize this is people's livelihoods and we want to pay our bills. And we've been dealing with this for 2 years and our industry was hobbled by this. And I still say we have these one bodies and these one lives. And I'm not really sure why we're not all sort of collectively getting together a little bit more on this and putting pressure where pressure needs to be. And the way that we have, I think, seen in the past year or so, and for all of history, the way to do that is to be in solidarity with each other. And so I urge everyone, I know it is so unbelievably scary. And I know that I'm saying this from a privileged position. And still, I believe that we all need to sort of get on the same page and be discussing amongst ourselves and be in solidarity with each other and have compassion. I have compassion because I realize we're not the same people and we all have different priorities, but I just want people to be safe. I don't want long haul for anybody. I don't want people's careers to be taken away forever or their lives. I mean, we had, the cast of Waitress, Nick died of this. And we have this whole big thing, we talk about his song in the show. And it's like, I know we're not in the same place that we were in March 2020, but God, how bad I would feel, how awful I would feel knowing that I went to the show unsure of my test or, whatever, and contributed to something continuing that could be detrimental to other people. And I'm glad that we have these statistics, and thank you to everybody here for giving this information. And I love that we're getting all of this, but we cannot let our union not take care of us. And maybe they're doing the best they can, but something in my gut tells me that it could be better and it could be clearer. And the information like this should be getting to us, not at a 6 o'clock meeting on a Monday when I couldn't even really go. You know what I mean? Because I have a show. I would have had a show. You know what I mean? It just needs to be better, I think. And I think it can be. And I hope that we can all come together and really put the pressure where it needs to be so that we can be safe.
And communication is so important. And I want to make it very clear, because there was a little sort of tongue-in-cheek talk about getting infected. We don't want not one person to get infected. And you do everything you can to stop anybody from getting infected, because you never know, that person could end up getting seriously ill and dying, even though they were fully vaccinated and boosted. We're talking about what we think right now, early days. It looks like that people are less likely to get seriously ill or die. We don't know the statistics yet on this. So let's be very clear. We don't want anybody to get infected, and we want as much protection as we can. The other thing I just want to end with is by saying that, to just repeat what we said at the beginning, we're not insiders. We haven't been backstage. We don't know what the protocols are. You heard so we're spitballing. We're thinking off the top of our heads. You heard some of the advice change. Oh, well, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do this. And what we're trying to do here, I think our best role here is to say, what is the science that we know? What's the aerosol science? What's the testing science? I'm sort of seeing people out in the field, and I'm talking to the CDC and the NIH and all that. So what do we know in terms of the data out there? But we are not experts on Broadway protocol, and we don't want to put ourselves out there as that, because we really don't know the nitty-gritty details of what the protocols are, how many different protocols there are, and all that. But I agree with the idea that the more communication, the better, and the fewer different schemes, the better. It's better to have one algorithm, and then we could see, where does this show fit in the algorithm? Those if-thens. Okay, if a theater greater than 25 people, whatever, then this. And what are the questions? I think if we come out of this with, what are the questions that people should be asking? What's the testing protocol? What are the exact tests you're doing? When are you doing them? What's the ventilation look like? What does the filtration look like? I think that's going to be, and then what's the protocol just in terms of if you have the sniffles, if you have any symptoms at all, you're not coming in. Right. Things like that we can just say, here's some basic protocol, and then we can talk about whether it should change a little bit for this show or that show. Does that make sense, Michael and Kim? Am I summarizing well? If not, feel free to say no. We have no ego here. No ego.
None at all. None at all. I think it was perfectly summarized. And I mean, I see that, it's heartbreaking to hear this and see that you're vulnerable, when I just can honestly tell you that you don't have to be. I mean, I probably shouldn't say, but it's a fixable issue. And I've helped schools and businesses, and I'll offer again, I've helped people all over the world on my own time open up safely and stay open. And I will cast this out to Broadway. That's why I'm doing the show tonight. If people need any advice, we have these little guides. I'm working with the state of California now on standards. Actually, what should you be measuring? Nobody, they just have ignored it indoors. So I'm happy. I put out that offer. I'm happy to help. Always happy to help. And yeah, and it's a fixable problem.
Thank you, Kim. I'm gonna reach out to you on Twitter, so I'm gonna message you. So just look at
perfect.
We'll hook you guys up.
Thank you. We gotta have. We need to have some conversations about this.
And the reality is, I had my own questions, and I think I only got two of the 6 answered. I think we might have to do. I don't know if any of you are available to come back for another show, but I have a feeling that there's a need for like a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 4 of this, especially to your point, Dr. LaPook, from the beginning of the show. You did your report on CBS Sunday Morning. That was brilliant. Yesterday morning. Today's Monday, December 20th, but that may be changing December 27th.
Yeah.
So, and we don't know what's going to happen on Broadway. We don't know, what's going to happen. Miguel, before we leave, though, for this particular episode of Stars in the House, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think Ciara brings up a good point, and it was we spoke about earlier about sort of a standard. I think, fortunately and unfortunately, we were in a very we were in a very different place where things happened very quickly and they moved very quickly, and here we are not doing the show because they took decisive action and said we need to. So there are different versions, like you were saying. The states all kind of Broadway theaters are under their own jurisdiction, and I think that is something that is can be troubling from one show to the next when people don't know what is the rule, what is the best way that it should be going on. In terms of my own personal experience, unfortunately we were, despite the unbelievable team that we have and the unbelievable protocols, we were hit really hard and had to shut down. What I want to talk about is when we come back. And when I say, and we will come back, we are going to be back up. And as we move into this next version of life, we've already been doing the Broadway in this version of life where testing and nose scraping becomes part of our daily life, and water bottles and masks on backstage are part of our daily life. And we get back into the world of a little bit less fear, but not it's not gone. Like you were saying before, having a booster, I'm not as afraid of dying as I was in April, but I am also afraid of. I have a family, I have a child, I have other people to think about. And despite all of the amazing efforts of the company that I work for, there is this risk that we go into. We take our masks off and we go and we walk around on stage with people. And as we move into this next version of life after Omicron, what should we? I just kind of want to know what should we expect as far as what is it that we are sort of expecting? And I know that's a crazy question because there's no way to know.
No, it's not a crazy question.
As it moves forward.
Before you guys answer, let me just bring on our last person just to observe and ask her own questions. How do you keep Tony Awards safe from COVID? Audra McDonald. Hi, Audra, dear.
Hi, sorry I'm late. Hi everyone. Nice to see you.
How are you, Audra?
We got a lot of great information. And Audra, you built those filters for your kids' school, right? Right after you spoke to Dr. Prather.
I bought all the material. I also got the CO2 thing. And I went a little crazy. I bought too many. And then I was like, all right, calm down. So I sent a couple. I returned a few. I was like, calm down. But maybe I should buy them again. I don't know. So I'm sorry I'm late. I had to do something else, but I'm here. Please, doctors,
so Audra,
experts.
We wanted to bring you on, but we're wrapping up. But we have Miguel, who's the title role in Hamilton. We have Ciara, who's the title, in Waitress, the star of Waitress.
Hi to both of you.
And basically at this point of the discussion, they're talking about their fears because, as we said, throughout the show, it's probably one of the only professions where you literally have the only way to work is without a mask. And unlike, all the television work you've been doing, which is like you have a scene and then you can put your mask back on, as you're on stage for 2.5 hours. And if you're the lead in Hamilton, you're the lead in Waitress, you're basically without a mask for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at in wrapping things up. Miguel,
and there are no set protocols yet, really, from show to
uniform.
Show, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, no, and I have that question too. My husband is in Assassins right now, so I'm so scared every night he comes home. I'm like, what is he bringing home with him? And they're being as careful as they possibly can, but it's the same thing. And I don't know if this question has been asked, but my question does have to do, Miguel, probably a bit to yours, with kids at home. I've got a 5-year-old who's now fully vaxxed, but what does that mean now that it's Omicron? I was so happy to get her 14 days past that second shot, and now all of a sudden it's like, and it's not enough. Right. So I don't know if that's been addressed.
That particular one hasn't been asked about 5-year-olds. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's my question.
I know we're running really late, but Dr. Mina and Dr. Prather and Dr. LaPook, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I can take a stab at that, and essentially, this has just been I sometimes take for granted how clear some of this is, for somebody who's been trained in this stuff to such a degree. And but when I hear you talk about it, and it's so clear how tired and frustrated all of us are, but in particular people who don't do this for a living, for whom this is just scary and unknown, which is, the vast majority of people on Earth. And so, I want to be clear that we are exiting this pandemic. The hardest part is over. But curveballs should be expected. Omicron was absolutely expected to happen sooner or later. There was really very little doubt, I would say, when you have hundreds of millions of people getting infected all the time. And I think the important part is the vaccines have gotten us the majority of the way there. Your child, a 5-year-old, has been vaccinated. Omicron is not safe. None of this is safe. But getting vaccinated has massively reduced the risk. And that is just, if nothing else, like take some solace in that, in knowing that Omicron, while the headlines are super scary, it's really transmissible. And the most important part of this is not on the per infection basis. It's that it's transmitting very quickly. And what we worry about as public health people is not the one child. And what's the risk to the child is generally still the same as though it was Delta for the most part. It's that we have such a massive number of people getting infected in a short amount of time that it worries us that we might have a serious problem keeping up in the hospitals and the ICUs.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to know while this virus is able to evade our immunity better, it is able to transmit better. Children were already extremely low risk, for severe disease. They can get long COVID and things like that, but truly on a per case basis, the risk was exceedingly low. But you have so many kids getting infected that you're going to see a lot of ill kids and a lot of sad parents. And but the risk per individual hasn't dramatically changed as a result of COVID. And I think that's important to know. It's the risk at the population level.
You mean as a result of Omicron?
Yes, sorry. As a result of Omicron.
Yeah.
The risk to an individual hasn't dramatically changed as a result of Omicron relative to where we were. The population has focused on it again because at a population level, it's very dangerous to our society. At an individual level, the risk hasn't actually changed that much.
And Audra, don't forget this. The vaccines are effective, even just 2. It's just that we know that over a number of months, they wane. Okay, it's starting at about, maybe 4 months, significantly, they start to go down, right? But if your kids just got vaccinated right before this, big spike of Omicron, they're pretty protected right now. It's just that in 4 to 6 months, you may have to start thinking, I know they're talking about, Tony Fauci was talking about maybe we're going to do it at 5 months, maybe it should be done a little bit earlier. But if they were just vaccinated and we're 2 weeks past that, they've got some good immunity, plus their kids, So.
Yeah, she was just vaccinated, but there's some kids in her classroom that just tested positive today. We just
but how sick are they?
I don't know. I mean,
what we're seeing, right? So far, it looks like, and again, early days, but so far, it looks like people who are vaccinated, and especially vaccinated and boosted, are having milder illness than certainly than people who are unvaccinated. I want to go back to that today's CDC figure. You are 20 times more likely to die if you are unvaccinated than if you are vaccinated and boosted. We know that it's protecting you from serious illness. And that's what happened with Delta. We expect it to happen with Omicron. Michael, I wanted to put that in at that moment, but did you have something else you wanted to say there?
No, I think, and Audra, before you came on, I want to I'll reiterate quickly what I said when before you were on, which is that we're on the off ramp to this. We're, as human beings and as our species, we're literally growing out of this pandemic. We're learning, And just like a kid learns how to grow out of their early infectious diseases, we're doing that just as adults when it's risky. But every month that goes by and every exposure or vaccine or boost that we get gets us closer to having put this virus in our rearview mirror. And the hardest part is done. And now emotionally, this might be the hardest part or the second hardest part of this pandemic. I think the first few months were probably the hardest for most. And now so many people thought we were, the media and the CDC and everyone made it seem like we were done.
We're done, yeah.
I don't feel surprised by it, but I don't want anyone to feel surprised next time it happens. But do know that it's like we kind of went here, it was really hard, and now we're on the way down, and we're like, it's going to be like a bumpy ride, but we're going down. And I want people to recognize that the hardest part is out of the way.
Kim, I think you should have the final word.
Yeah, there's just one part that's missing, and I'm trying to bite my tongue, but it didn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
If people had just said it was in the air in month 1, we would have kicked its butt and it would have been over. And we should have learned. SARS-1 was airborne, and they said, okay, in the future, apply the precautionary principle to airborne, because airborne that's how you end up in a pandemic. Yet I've been fighting with people for 2 years to getting them to believe it's airborne. It's a joke. And so I don't believe, I don't just accept oh, it's just the way it is, and our bodies get used to it and we'll just get through it. It didn't have to go through this many waves. You can just look around all these places where they're look at the UK right now. That's we get to see what's going to happen to us if we do and we continue to do it, and we continue to deny. WHO to this day will not say the word airborne. They go out of their way to not say the word airborne. It makes
I don't understand
crazy.
that.
It makes me nuts, because we didn't have to go through wave after. We're smarter than that. Yes, they did in 1918. They went through several. We have vaccines. We have technology. They knew about ventilation back then. They knew about all the things to do back then, and we just ignored it. So I'm sorry. I get a little worked up, because I just don't accept that it had to be it didn't, And what I will also say is, you can say this one will go away, but another one, what's going to happen if there's,
right.
Will we learn? And we should learn. And I think the big lesson is that clean air is really important. We deserve clean air where we spend most of our time. And it makes me crazy. It's not that much, not compared to the healthcare costs, not compared to shutting down your Broadway show. Money it's not, I promise you. If we put in clean air, allergies go away, COPD, all the problems people have with the rest, all these things start to, kids are protected. Think about equity issues where people that got the most affected are people that have been breathing the crappiest air their whole lives. So then they were susceptible to this.
Yeah.
We could take care of that. We could give them clean air in their classrooms. What a concept. It would fix their cognitive. They'd attend more classes. It would fix so many things that we've just, as a society, put up with. Sorry, I'm putting on it's not an acting performance, but I'm pretty worked up, because it just doesn't have to be this way.
Thank you for your information, though. I mean, since talking to you the last time, and I've been following you on Twitter, and when you get into, a lather, I'm right there behind you going, go, Kim, go, Kim, go. Tell them. But
I need that. that.
No, I mean, one of the things, since speaking to you, we have someone come in and clean our house every week, and they wear a mask, but when they come in, I open every single window. And I turn on all of our air purifiers and all that stuff, full blast, even though they're masked, we're masked, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Ventilation has become everything to me since speaking to you. Again, just trying to empower us in any way we can to kind of help ourselves through this. So thank you for that.
No,
layers of protection.
So promise me,
protection.
the layers of protection, but just promise me the more people that I do this, in my quote spare time, which I don't have that. I do it because if I tell you and then you tell all your friends, and that's worked. We have our public health people have kind of let us down.
Yeah.
But we don't have to wait for them. We do know what to do, and we just have to help each other. And that's where the uniting part. I get sad when we have this divisive stuff going on, where I sometimes am looked at as a bad guy for being the bearer of bad news again, But anyway, so we just have to work together. We're smarter than the virus. We don't act like it all the time. So yeah. Anyway, that's my
Dr.
last
Prather, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you so much for that and for everything. To Audra's point, I have to get in one of my questions that I did not get answered. And I know that this may be our longest Stars in the House out of 505, I think we're up to, that we've ever had, but it's so important. And this actually, because Miguel and Ciara are in shows right now, and for any people that are in Broadway shows, one of the requirements for proof of vaccination is because now we're getting tourists in New York City and people from around the world. And the list of vaccinations aren't just Moderna and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. It's a whole list of acceptable vaccinations. I've been reading regarding Omicron that some of them, like the Russian and the Chinese and some of the other vaccines, that basically they're kind of worthless against Omicron. Is that true? And I know that we're already so long, but I think it's an important question because you're in an audience and you're assuming everyone's fully vaccinated. And I know that's a whole other discussion about what is fully vaccinated. Does that include the booster? But on this specific question regarding the World Health Organization and what they consider approved vaccinations, is it safe if you're with people that are vaccinated, if they're vaccinated that are not Pfizer and Moderna, basically?
Well, remember that, I mean, the fact of the matter is people transmit all the time despite their vaccination status. So I think actually one of the worst indicators of being considered not infectious right now is just knowing your vaccination status. It just isn't, it's not a virus that was going to stop transmitting because of the vaccines. And we're obviously seeing it flow through a lot of vaccinated people. So for the individuals, I think the question is more about, if you're asking the question about the people who are vaccinated with those particular vaccines, then you have to be, they might be concerned about their own health. But I would argue that we don't want to assume at this point that vaccination status means not infectious. I would say quite not the contrary, but just it's not a useful, it's not a reliable piece of information. It's probably the least reliable piece of information we have on somebody's infectiousness status is whether they've been vaccinated or not. It does at risk, but It should never be assumed that just because you're vaccinated or double or triple vaccinated that you aren't spreading. And just what we're seeing with Omicron right now, it blows through communities of vaccinated people quite fast. And so I would say that it almost is like vaccines should be thought of as keeping us as individuals safe and should not be thought of at a community level. They can put a dent into spread or they can slow it down a bit. But from a one-on-one interaction level, it doesn't, that reduction on a personal level isn't great enough that I think you can reasonably use that to assess your own risk of spreading to others or that you'll get it from them.
Okay.
If that makes sense, And again, with all that, I'm sure John's, we have to remember that the vaccines are doing their job. They're keeping you out of the hospital.
They're astonishing. And maybe you're vaccinated and you're still spreading it. We know that's happening. They're looking at whether you more quickly drop in your viral titer, you're infectious for less amount of time. But I agree with Michael about that you obviously, I've had half a dozen people. I've lost count now in the last week of people who are fully vaccinated and they were boosted and they were infected by other people who were fully vaccinated and boosted. So we know what's happening. So yeah, you should feel some confidence, which is what gives me peace of mind in being fully vaccinated. And if it's time for a boosted, to know that you're statistically probably at lower risk of getting seriously ill, which is really what.
So I guess to answer the moving forward thing for those of us who have not been infected, we need to focus more on what Kim is saying to keep ourselves from getting infected, but fall back on what Michael's saying is know that if we do, the odds are much higher that we will not be seriously ill. But I'm liking this ventilation thing. I'm about to open the windows of my dressing room. We're airing it out. I'm going to air it out.
Open.
Oh no!
Bring one in. Bring one in, Ciara. But he brought it. He brought the window in.
For ventilator.
But the other thing is to up your mask game, so that people who are I'm giving out. I have KN95s here, and I know when I'm around, if I'm going to be in a room, say at I'll have them if I see somebody is in a floppy mask that's not very good. I just think we're at the point now where if you're using masks as a layer of protection, get the best possible mask you can.
Stocking stuffers, baby.
Yeah, and I don't know anybody. There's been all these polls on Twitter about, people are asking, do you know anyone who's caught it in N95? And I'm still waiting. You wear an N95, and some people will say, oh, it has to be fit tested. That's BS. I mean, it's great if it is for doctors, for the medical field, it does. But for regular people, a poor quote, one that isn't perfect, and you can even do fit testing at home if you want to. I know how to do that. But anyway, point is, even if it's just a little, not perfect, beards are not good. I have to say, facial hair is not good. Sorry, Miguel.
Kim will come to your house and make sure that your N95 is fit test. All the millions of people out there watching this.
Yeah, but
by the way,
N95 still beats one of those damn surgical masks, which make me crazy. Those are designed for droplets, not aerosols.
Dr. Prather, the other really valuable thing, just in case people didn't watch at the beginning, is that just because you go into a place that's empty doesn't mean it's safe to take off your mask. What you were saying is that someone's there before you, the aerosols stay like an elevator or a bathroom to make sure you keep on your mask, even though it's empty.
Yep, exactly. Especially like somebody was saying they're in hotels and stuff. The internal corridors in hotels are notoriously pretty poorly ventilated. And they also have air shooting out into the doors from all the people in all the rooms constantly. Yeah. And so you're just walking, there's no people, but there can be virus. It doesn't need company. So
air shooting out of things reminds me in the airplane, right?
Oh, yeah.
The nozzle above you.
Yeah.
Have it pointed right down on you as forcefully as you can to help disperse air, right, Kim? I was thinking, well, I don't want that air. No, it's actually been filtered.
That is filtered. Yeah. It's just the time where you have to be the most safe. The worst time for an airplane is boarding and unboarding, because they aren't usually. You can make them turn on their filters. Once you're in there, the CO2 meter will actually get pretty high because they don't bring in fresh air. But the point is, like, you're safe once you're in the air. But boy, that boarding process makes me nervous.
Yeah, they do bring in fresh air from the outside during the middle of the flight. But you're right. I've spoken to a bunch of people about this, and I've actually had that meter. It goes up to about 1,500. In the middle.
25 for me.
Oh, yeah.
It gets up there. Yeah.
What? Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
Are we pulling an all-nighter here, Seth and James? What are we doing here?
Good morning, everyone. It's after midnight.
Like I said, there's going to be inevitably a need for a part 2, part 3. I hope all of you, including Audra, Miguel, and Ciara, will join us if you have more questions. And Dr. Mina and Dr. Prather and Dr. LaPook, thank you. I know that this discussion probably inevitably brought up more questions and we weren't able to get to them, or maybe the answers in science haven't even been discovered yet or figured out yet, but we will be back. We wish everyone, I was going to say, if you're not here with us for our holiday special, happy holidays, which is going to be Thursday, Ann Hampton Callaway and Liz Callaway.
And Natasha Diaz and her dad, who's being honored by the Kennedy Center.
That's right. They're going to be here on Thursday. And Dr. LaPook, if you're able to join us, maybe you can join us then.
I think so. But and also, please know, everybody, I've said it a few times, we scientists, are coming here. Truly, this is with humility. We're trying the best we can. We don't have all the answers. We are not experts at going backstage in Broadway theaters. We're trying to think correctly. And I can just see on the faces, of Miguel and Ciara. And then in the past with Audra, that look of like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And feeling out of control, which we hate to feel, and being scared. And the fact is that now, almost 2 years into this, at the beginning of the pandemic, you go into fight or flight mode, and the cortisol's going and the adrenaline's going. You can't keep in that mode for 2 years. Right. So that goes down, but the crisis has continued, and now here we are. So I really, Ciara, it was so moving to me to hear you talking about from your heart about what this has all meant for you. And Miguel, it is written all over your face. Yeah. And so anyway, I just send you all sorts of good vibes and spirit and empathy, and we will get through this. We said this at the beginning. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. I agree with Michael. I think we're heading towards the off ramp. It's going to be a few more bumps in the road, but we're going to get there. It's not 2 years ago.
And I can't help but promote me and Ciara. January 23rd, the Seth Content series.
You're going to be right there, Ciara. You'll be right there. And I'll be sitting here 4 feet away after we've all done our rapid tests right before, and you'll be singing to me.
Perfect. Can't wait.
Say good night, Renée.
All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you on
Bye.
Thursday. Bye.
Good night.